Good morning, everyone. We'll start with a chant, I think. Om Jo Shantihi Antariksham Shantihi Prithvi Shantihi Apa Shantihi Oshadaya Shantihi Vanaspataya Shantihi Vishve Deva Shantihi Brahma Shanti Sarvam Shantihi Shantireva Shantihi Sama Shantiredhi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, may there be peace on earth, may peace be in the heaven, may peace be in the waters, the herbs and the plants. May peace be among the gods. May peace pervade the whole universe. May that peace be manifest in the hearts of all. Peace, peace, peace. This morning's talk, when I first thought about it, I thought, well, what is worship? Now, I asked people who were around, and since most of the people that I asked were Vedantists already, the first thing that they answered was, well, puja. You do puja in the temple, that's worship every single day. We do it in 2 places. And I thought, yeah, that's the very ritualistic worship. We got to talking a little further and decided there was a lot more to worship than just the ritual and the puja. We decided that there were all kinds of worship that manifest in our lives today. We have hero worship. We have all kinds. We try and worship our work. We try and worship, put our attention on things. And then finally, people went, well, actually, my idea is to surrender everything that we do as an offering to God. But let's go back to our other kinds of worship. Why do we do hero worship? Because we all have heroes in this world. We have people who manifest the traits and behaviors that we want to have in our hearts and in ourselves, manifest them. We think about all those people who embody that behavior. I can think of a whole lot just sitting here. We look at Gandhi, who is worshipped by people all over the world as the embodiment of peaceful action. We have many heroes in the sports world, people who have overcome huge difficulties. Right now, I'm more aware of Jackie Robinson, who made such a huge difference in baseball. Abraham Lincoln, who stood up to everyone when it came to the segregation and the civil war in our country that was dividing it so desperately. We have Mother Teresa. She went into the poorest part of Calcutta and took beggars off the street to give them a comfortable death. We emulate these people. We put them up on a pedestal. We want to be like them. If not in action, but we want those traits in ourselves. Another one that has just come to the forefront is Black Panther, Chadwick Boseman, going through all of that cancer treatment without letting anyone know and making all of those fantastic movies. This is something where we can see total selflessness. And this is also the fact that we think about them, we think about their qualities. This is a kind of worship. We think about Christ, and we had the little books that said, what would Jesus do? What would Buddha do? To remind us to make our behavior consistent with theirs. Swami Abhedananda, I'm going to read one quote here for you now. What we're doing there is looking outside for inspiration. All of those things are dealing with outside of ourselves. Swami Abhedananda said, haven't you read in the Kata Upanishad, the Creator made our senses outward going. All our senses are turned outward. They have to be turned inward by the help of the outside objects. That's the reason for the prevalence of the paraphernalia in ritualistic worship, why we have lamps and incense, why we have fruits and flowers. All of these are necessary to occupy our mind with the deity. Think about it. Even seeing the pictures and the constant reminders of our heroes that we see, it makes us look inside ourselves. Would I behave like that in that situation? St. Augustine stated it in another way. Men go abroad to admire the heights of mountains, the mighty waves of the sea, the broad tide of the rivers, the vast compass of the ocean, the circular motions of the stars, and yet they pass over in the mystery of themselves without a thought. And a man named Timothy Egan commented on it, that he was on a spiritual pilgrimage in France, and he said, we are spiritual beings, but for many of us, malnutrition of the soul is the plague of our modern life. Now that phrase really struck me, because malnutrition, we can all understand that, but malnutrition of the spirit, how do we feed our spirit? What do we do? We're so not at ease with what we call real life. It is not satisfying. It doesn't fulfill our hunger. But all this time we're looking, from time immemorial, from time, prehistoric times, human beings have been looking for the divine. We see all these little tiny prehistoric gods and goddesses that have been made. There's no reason, that doesn't fulfill a tool use in society. It's a spiritual use in society, and we've all been looking for it constantly. We begin because we have, in looking for our spiritual food, we try to make things better. We try to be better ourselves. We try to make things better. But unfortunately, because we've been dealing with the externals all this time, that's where we start. We start with making our homes better, making our job better, making the house cleaner. And that is where our problems start, because that's an unending miasma that is never satisfied. People can always think of an improvement, but it's still externals we're dealing with. It's all the external world we're dealing with. We still have not come to ourselves. Okay, so the modern age comes to the self. And what is the self? How do we define the self in this modern age? Mostly the body. We go on, we have a huge emphasis on our bodies. We have every exercise and gizmo that you can imagine to make yourself healthier. This is not wrong, we need a healthy body, but it's once again not feeding our spirit, because believe it or not, this body is not going to last forever. It will not, but we keep working on it. We focus on it. This is nothing new. Swami Ramakrishnananda said, you, meaning all of us, have been worshiping this God of our body for so many lives. It's not easy to begin to worship God, the eternal being, all at once. If you would raise yourself, your divine self, you must crucify the body and conquer the mind, conquer the senses. Now here, crucify does not mean literal. Crucify means detach ourselves, detach this inordinate attachment to this very, very temporal thing. Rather, occupy the body as you would a car, a vehicle to take you to your destination. And the destination, hopefully, is eternal freedom. We don't worship our cars. We take care of them. We give them gas, we give them oil, we do the tune-ups, we give them new tires, and we make sure everything's running. And hopefully we keep them clean because they're more pleasant to get into. But once we get into our car, we don't think about it. We turn it on and we head to our destination. So it's my feeling when Swami Ramakrishnananda said, crucify the body and the senses, he didn't mean that. He meant crucify our inordinate attachment. Now, how do we get to our destinations? Do we know where we're going? Most of us use maps. Now I still use maps. Many people use GPS. However, and these can help us get to our destinations. If you can still read a map, okay. Sometimes it's confusing because the roads have changed. GPS would be compared, I would say maps would be compared to our scriptures. We would read them, they would tell us, we could think over, discriminate about the ideas that are presented. We could decide on a destination. GPS would be more like a guru. GPS talks back to you. GPS you can ask questions of, hopefully. Sometimes Siri and I get into places where she's going, make the next legal U-turn, make the next whatever. Anyway, she drives me crazy sometimes. But why does she drive me crazy? Because I thought I knew a better way and was not listening to her. I decided that a friend said if I took that shortcut, I would get there quicker. And I decided to do that rather than follow the directions, which hopefully keep you out of congestion, hopefully keep you out of problems. Oftentimes I've ended up in neighborhoods just wandering around looking for a way out of the neighborhood. Many times I have, especially in Los Angeles. But in order to use these maps and in order to use our GPS, we have to decide where we're going. And as it has been said over and over again, if you don't know where you're going, you may not get there. As Christ said, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And Swami Vivekananda said, if all the scriptures in the world were burned and disappeared, and that one statement remained, we would have religion. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And I'm going to relate another Hindu story. This one day, God got tired of people. They were always pestering him, asking him for things. So he said to his advisors, I'm going away to hide for a while. He asked his advisors, where would you suggest I hide? One of the advisors said, hide on the highest mountain. No one will find you there. Another advisor said, no, hide at the bottom of the sea. They'll never go down there for you. Others said, no, hide on the other side of the moon. No one can find you there. And God turned to his most intelligent angel and said, where would you suggest I hide? And the intelligent angel looked at him and smiled and he said, go hide yourself in the human heart. It's the only place where they never go. When we talk about purifying our heart, how do we navigate the path to our spiritual path to our hearts? Well, there's many ways. According to Vedanta, we do japa meditation. And according to Buddhism, there's meditation. Most of the religions in the world now, you do meditation. But what do you meditate on? As Swami Brahmananda said, you can't ask someone to immediately sit down and meditate on the infinite. They have no conception. We have no conception. Our minds are not expanded enough to know what the infinite is. We don't have a definition. So if most of us were told to sit down and meditate on the infinite Brahman, I think basically either our minds would go blank, we'd go into the Zulu land of meditation, which is nowhere, or fall asleep, or get terribly, terribly frustrated and just give up. But you can ask a person, to meditate on an ideal of perfection, i.e. an incarnation, an idea of God, a human personification, which we can identify with and we can picture. The reason for thousands of years, Christ has the pictures of Christ that are around. They're all constant reminders of God. The pictures, the statues, of Buddha, constant reminders. We don't worship that object or that picture, but our minds can immediately go to their philosophy, to their being, to their behavior. This is something our beginners' minds can latch onto and look at and be there. When we can then attach an idea, a new idea, to a known activity. What do you do every morning when you wake up? I wake up and make 2 cups of coffee because I can't even open my eyes until I have coffee. So how would I spiritualize that? I didn't for a long time, but now I kind of offer it in my mind to say, I think I give it to Holy Mother because I don't think Ramakrishna would care for coffee, but I say Holy Mother will. And I think about that when I drink my coffee. But if we can attach a spiritual idea to any little activity that we do daily, just think of God while you do it. It's not difficult, it just takes practice. It's not anything that's impossible. If you, we all have little rituals that we do. And if we just offer it to God, think of God as we do it, it becomes so habitual that you don't have to force yourself to do it. We kind of build a new groove in our brain. We build the God groove. And we begin to practice the presence of God. Like Brother Lawrence said, he was a 17th century saint, and he said, the most excellent way of going to God was that of doing your common business without any view of pleasing man, and as far as you were capable of, purely for the love of God. Don't think about, this is karma yoga. This is exactly karma yoga. Don't think about the results. Do everything you do as an offering to God. We still tend to be terribly attached to the results of every action that we do. We feel slighted if people don't notice it, or we feel persecuted if they do notice it and don't like it. But we're attached to whether other people like it or don't like it. We're attached to the external, all of the external evaluations of our action. Now, as far as I know, the Lord doesn't do that. The Lord only looks at the motivation in your heart, and if it's done with love, it's right and totally acceptable and leading to perfection. Brother Lawrence went on to say, it's the great delusion to think that the times of prayer ought to differ from other times, that we are strictly obliged to adhere to God by action in the time of action, and as by prayer in the time of prayer. It means making your whole day a spiritual day rather than I'm going to sit down and meditate now, and then I'm going to get up, and then I'm going to go rushing around and forget God for a while and not. No, try to spiritualize and think of God with everything you do, even when you tie your shoes. It just doesn't matter. And we should never get tired of doing little things, not if we're doing them for the love of God and with love in our hearts for God. Because you don't get tired of doing things for someone you love. You never get tired of that. We don't need to worry too much if we don't do it well at first, because we're beginners on the trail, and you don't have to. I think one of the most harmful things is castigating yourself for not being perfect. We're not perfect. We're human beings. And until we realize God, we're not going to be perfect. We're going to make mistakes. We don't have to repeat our mistakes, but they will happen. You know, we're only human. As a friend of mine says, God wouldn't have made erasers if we didn't make mistakes. We all do. But don't think this one little mistake is the failure of the season and you're never going to be able to pick yourself up again, and therefore you have to quit meditating. No, just say, okay, I made a mistake. I'll just get on it and go again. But don't give up. We have to keep doing it. And as Swami Brahmananda, Swami Premananda, Swami Abhedananda, Swami Ramakrishnananda have all said over and over again, work and worship go hand in hand. Work is worship. And if that alone, if you can do all your work for the Lord and with a feeling of love, that will lead you to God realization right there. Unfortunately, many of us get caught up in the work and we forget that we're doing it for the Lord, and we forget that we're really not doing it. We're just going through the motions. As soon as we start thinking, I am doing this, we get worried, we get anxious, we get to wondering what the results are going to be. We paralyze ourselves with mental anxiety. If we honestly think of the Lord the entire time, you don't even really get tired. I have seen some of the monks in India who have spent 14 hours a day out doing relief work, and they come back to the mott and they continue with their duties there. And they go out the next day and do it again. This was in a time, my first trip to India, there was a huge flood in Bengal, and it was Durga Puja. And at Belur Math, where they have the huge, big celebration, they expected, I think that was 78, so they expected about 50,000 people, which they were cooking for. They had 200 monks at the Belur Math at that time, and 160 of them were out doing relief work every single day. They left at 4 a.m. They did relief work all day long. They came home and they prepared the puja. we met the monk who was in charge of the kitchen, and he was running a fever of 100. And he said, well, I'm not sick enough to go to bed yet. When it hits 100.5, I go to bed. But this was the not disregard for their body, but their regard for the Lord's work. And the disregard was a natural occurrence. They got, the puja went off. There were probably not quite 50,000 that got there because of the flooding, but everything went off very, very well, and everything was taken care of. And they got all of the distribution done for the relief work. So if we can use our work, whatever it is, as a means of worshiping, it will lead us to this kind of God realization. Brother Lawrence lived with God every single minute of his life. It got to be so habitual that he never thought about not being with God. Once that habit is established, you pretty much are free of anxiety, free of fear, free of worry. Because what is there to worry about if God is always at your side? Gopalarma, who was a saint in a woman, an old woman who used to come and visit Ramakrishna, she had the constant vision of the baby Gopala. That's who she worshiped, the baby Krishna. Now, Swami Vivekananda, he thought that visions of God were not real. But he met Gopalarma, and Ramakrishna said, now, do you doubt this? And he said, no. She fed her baby. She took him, carried him on her breast the whole time. She went everywhere. And this was her constant remembrance of God. She had already realized it. This constant forming the habit of thinking of God will purify your mind. And Swami Abhedananda says it a whole lot better than I do. Instead of thinking about oneself, one should think of others. This leads to the gradual elimination of the nervousness of the mind. Purification of the mind means nothing but the annihilation of the egocentric idea and the removal of selfishness from the mind. The more the mind expands, the more the egoistic ideas are annihilated. When the mind is freed from nervousness, it becomes pure, and the knowledge of Brahman is revealed. Now, I think we've all met someone in our life, be it one of the Swamis or someone, who kind of walked through life with this calmness that never got disturbed. I think one of our biggest, we've all seen some of the senior Swamis in the order, of course, go through huge things, and nothing ruffles their feathers. Yes, they may have a reaction, but it's on the surface, it's not deep. It never goes deep because they keep that absolute centeredness and God-centeredness at all times. Look at what the Dalai Lama went through when the Chinese took over Tibet. I mean, here he was, a very young man that had to sneak out of his own country in the dead of night, going over mountain passes that were totally disastrous. And yet, was he worried and thinking so much that I'll never get out? No. He knew that the Lord's will would be done. He got to India. If any of you want to read his story, what's the name of his book about?
My Land, My People.
My Land, My People, of his story of coming out of Tibet. Doesn't worry. So this purification of the mind, when we control the mind and the senses, this is the path to purification of the heart. Because as soon as we can control the senses, which are all outgoing, bring them in, look at our interior motivations and reasons for our action. Think before you act. You know the old saying that probably your grandmother said, count 10 before you say something. It's true. It's that little bit of space to evaluate, how do I really feel? And not just come out with something, a snappy response. And as soon as the heart is pure, we'll go back to what Christ said, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Now, this always got me, even when I was a child. I thought, you can actually see God? And I also read it in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, can you see God? And he said, yes, as I see you. Well, now to me, that would be just like, wow. It's to purify the heart. It doesn't mean we have to have, there's not a lot of external qualifications. It doesn't matter where we're born. It doesn't matter what language we speak. It doesn't matter what color we are. It doesn't matter what our education is. It doesn't matter how much money we have. It doesn't matter about any of these external things. Not one of those external qualifications are applicable to purification of the heart. Purification of the heart is simply, I say, turning our entire mind, being towards the divine, which is within us. One of my a Catholic priest that I admire the way he puts things, Anthony de Mello, who was Indian, he asked, when we transform, we must transform ourselves and throw off our misidentification with all of these external qualities that we have. Now, Anthony de Mello stated it this way: transform your being. What do? Nothing. In order to be transformed, you have to see. See something that transforms you. Now, I'm sure everyone has had an aha moment in their life when something they saw took them out of themselves, whether it was nature, whether it was a person. There is something that has gone and fills you with awe. Okay? You don't have to fix anything. You just have to see everything in a new way. Change comes through seeing things, looking at everything in a new way. Change of idea, transformation of the heart. Like the man who said to his wife, this one, I've changed my mind. And she said, thank God. I hope the new one works better. But changing our way of seeing, probably 30 years ago, I found a book in our bookstore and it said, when you hear hoofbeats, think of a zebra. And I went, okay. As I read that title, I thought, we all have such preconceived ideas and we categorize things immediately from our past experiences. Now, when you hear hoofbeats, we had horses up here at the time. I never would have thought of a zebra. But it did point out to me how we classify things before we really see them or hear them. We hear a little piece and we go, oh, I don't like that. Now, if we took the time to listen to the entire thing, or to listen to the entire idea, or to see the whole thing through, but it makes us feel safer to have a manageable, to classify the unknown into a manageable idea, one that makes us safe. But how would our world change if we truly experienced what was going on, instead of defining and dismissing? This is the idea of the power of the presence of now, living in the moment. Every self-help and every religion says the past is over, the future hasn't happened. So what are we really dealing with right now? And psychologists tell us that, spiritual teachers tell us that. Let go of the past and don't worry about the future. It will happen. Okay, so everyone just take one little minute and we're all listening to a lecture. I'm talking too much. But where's your head? What are you thinking about? Are you thinking about, well, in 15 more minutes, I have to go do this? That's what most of us do. Oh, oh golly, I should have planned that. I should have taken out that recycling because it's just sitting down there. We all do that, but we cannot live in if only I had, or what if. We can't live there. That creates worry and anxiety. Some of us are wishing, well, I should have done my exercising early this morning because it might get hot today. Oh dear. Well, the tide's not going to be out, so I guess I can't go to the beach. Transformation and seeing things in a new way takes a lot of time. And it takes a lot of practice. But it's not impossible. We have to recognize, though, what our mind is doing. That's one of the things that you find when you first start meditating. You sit down and you start meditating and you have say you have a mantra and you're saying your mantra and you're doing your thing. And all of a sudden you've gone like on a total vacation to God knows where. And you have repainted your bedroom, or you have planned the whole next day, and you go, how did I get there? I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, and I'm not anymore. Well, as one of our nuns said, the bus went by and we got on. The bus can go by, you don't need to hop on. You can watch those thoughts go by, but we do not need to attach ourselves to them. And right now, since most of us are isolating to a certain degree, I think we're going out and walking outside and being outside a lot more. This is another way to focus our mind. We can honestly see where we are. I know oftentimes before we were isolated, walks were, how far can I go in how short a time? How fast can I get my heart beating? But I was not enjoying the walk particularly. Now, if we take a look, I don't know, you have a little more time, you can take more time to see what's going on outside. Bird watching is really fun. And there are so many right now, but we can notice the changes in the ocean. We can notice the changes in the air. We can notice what is really going on and be thankful, I know, for what we do have. All of these things to remember, as they say, an attitude of gratitude for what the good things in our life is also thanking the Lord for what we have. It's all remembering the Lord. Doesn't matter what we do. If your job today is sweeping the path, it's not, do it. I remember Swami Prabhupada used to tell me when he would often, quite often, even when he was really old, he died in 1976. So in 1972, periodically you could find him out sweeping the path. And I said, Swami, why are you doing this? And he said, well, Maharaj walks here and I can't have him hurt his feet. So everything he did, even the most menial, ridiculous, what we call ridiculous job, he did it for Maharaj. This, when it pervades your entire life, you become a transformed person. And sometimes you won't know what's happening. You just keep doing it, keep practicing, keep practicing. But now the statement that was made quite a bit earlier about spiritual malnutrition, what can we do practically? Okay, practically we can read inspiring books. We can get our, if you like philosophy, make sure you read the philosophy books, read the Upanishads, read Shankara, read the yogas, read Swamiji, he does both, Bhakti and read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, read the Gospel of Holy Mother. If you're a Bhakta, just practice, practice, practice. Set up an altar or a special place in your home where, and when I say an altar, just to place a little shelf with some pictures, holy pictures, things that remind you of your spiritual life. And then don't, oftentimes I know I was embarrassed at one point and it had doors and I'd close the doors. Don't, because every time you walk by, you will see that and it will be a constant reminder, even if you don't pay too much attention to it at first. But just walking by and seeing that picture all the time, someone, I think it's in the gospel when Ramakrishna said, I can tell where a person's mind is by the pictures he has hung in his house. And when we have I think he was talking about pictures of the Queen and pictures of some government officials. But if we have pictures of the gods and goddesses or pictures of nature that inspire, lift your heart, we all know what lifts our own hearts. And that's what you want to have reminders of in your room or your home. In a space, as I say, a small space where you only do, like where you sit every day to do your job or your meditation. Doesn't have to be long, but if you have one special place that isn't used for other things, even just one chair that you use. You also probably will notice that some of the friends that you had, you don't have all that much in common with anymore. And you're getting a new group of friends who have similar interests. Well, that's what Ramakrishna called keeping company with the holy people who have ideas that you have, people with whom you share similarities. All of these things can be done without too much problem. If we set one chair aside that you're comfortable in, that you can sit straight with your back straight and not think about how you're sitting. Yeah. If you set up an altar, and this is just a tiny thing. I remember in the first house that, when I first took up meditation, the first house we set up an altar, and it was just one little shelf, and it had a picture of Holy Mother and a picture of Ramakrishna, and I think a picture of Swami P. And that was it, and an incense burner and a candle, and a big Victorian chair that I sat in with the cat to meditate. But Swami Abhedananda says the altar stands for the altar of the heart, your own heart. The light of the candle is the symbol of the light of intellect. It's the light of the pure intellect that reveals the spirit seated on the altar of the heart. Each day, if you're into the bhakti aspect, you offer a flower or two, just something, an offering. The flower is symbolic of the good thoughts and pure feelings that should be offered to the Supreme Spirit. If you offer fruit or a little candy, that's the fruits of our works. Now he tells you to go, he goes on, first sit in silence at the altar until you realize the spiritual meaning of the symbols. Then place the flowers, light the candles, burn the incense, and sit in meditation, closing your eyes. Think of the altar of your heart. Dedicate it to the Supreme Spirit under any name or any form that appeals to you. Offer the flowers of good thoughts and pure feelings to your chosen ideal. And concentrating your mind upon that form, repeat the name mentally and commune in spirit with the divine ideal through meditation. Now that is probably one of the simplest how to meditate that I have read. Simple, straightforward, not difficult to do. The American Indians had a little different, stated it a little differently on what is worship and what's not. Worship is not contained in a building or limited to certain days, but is an ongoing, every minute of life. Personal health is a continual process of keeping oneself strong spiritually, mentally, and physically. And in doing so, keeping away or overcoming those forces that might make one unwell. To remain well, individuals must stay in harmony with themselves, their environment, and their creator. Harmony thus becomes a shield against disharmony. I think when Timothy Egan spoke about the malnutrition of our spirit, it's the disharmony that we are not experiencing because we have not put our minds to it. But it's entirely doable. I will end with a chant if I can find it. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman floweth all, yet Brahman remains unchanged. Peace, peace, peace. Now, if anyone has any questions or comments, please. And I hope you're all keeping well, not doing too much outside exercise right now. I just heard the air quality everywhere is bad. So, any comments?
I have a question. Where's the mousetrap in the tomato garden?
I don't know.
You want it in your little tomato thing? I couldn't find the trap this morning.
I couldn't either.
Okay, we'll put a new one.
I think the mouse ran off with it.
No.
Now everyone knows my gardening is really getting eaten, and these are raised beds with fences all around them. And
Yeah, anyway, I'll put a new one.
I don't know how. We're working on it.
Okay.
Any other questions? Anything? Okay. All is spirit, all is spirit, all of life is spiritual, and that's what we remember. It's good to see you all.